And we are now live.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Vermont State Senate Committee on Institutions. I am Joe Benning, your host for this afternoon. I'm from the Caledonia County District. With me are Senator Mazza from Colchester Grand Isle, Senator Ingalls from Essex Orleans, Senator McCormick from Windsor, and Senator Parent from Franklin County. Today is Wednesday, March 30th, 2022. We are going to be talking about some gubernatorial appointments, specifically to the Parole Board. We have several witnesses on with us. Tom Griffin, I understand you have to be gone by 3 o'clock. Is that correct?
I have rescheduled my other Zoom meeting till 3:30, so I'm fine.
Oh, great. Okay. Just for all of your edification, we are on YouTube. And we have no idea who's out there in the listening audience. So what we try to do is make sure that when witnesses are talking, they actually give a little biographical sketch about their background so the audience can know who you are and how you fit into the puzzle. We also ask that if you get into any kind of vernacular that may be common vocabulary between all of us, there's an audience out there that we don't know that they will be up to speed. So if you get interrupted by me, it's not to be rude. It's just that I'd like to ask you to explain what X, Y, or Z happens to stand for. So with that, if Tom, you're okay, I'm going to start with Mary Jane Ainsworth, who is at the head of my list, and ask Mary Jane if you could again identify yourself, give us a little biographical background, and tell us how you fit into this picture. And welcome to Senate Institutions.
Sure. Good afternoon, senators and committee. I'm Mary Jane Ainsworth. I have been appointed the director of the Parole Board. I was originally appointed in January of 2019 when the previous director retired. During the first 2 years, I reapplied for reappointment in 2021 as the term had ended. As I enjoyed my first 2 years with the Parole Board. I have previously worked for the Department of Corrections for approximately 12 and a half years in many different roles, to include policy, sentence calculations. I was responsible for standing up the offender management system and working on the work processes and database management after that. During the first 2 years of the Parole Board, I felt like I made good strides and really enjoyed my time. I played an integral role for the board in drafting and implementing the Justice Reinvestment Initiative and legislation. I've really I worked with the Council of State Governments extensively to try to look at the board, bringing in best practice, and also getting the board at the table in many instances where the board hadn't been on different committees and different work groups, getting the board's face out there and letting folks know the good work that the board does and the needs of the board. That's a quick little, do you want me to keep going or?
You have all the time you'd like. And I forgot to remind my committee that there are 4 of you for appointments, and each committee member will be giving a little floor speech about one of you. We're going to flip a coin to see who gets who. You're all, of course, approved by the committee, which I'm sure you'll be. So hoping my committee is all paying very close attention. But again, you have all the time in the world.
Okay, just a couple little other things. The big goals that I have been really looking at in my time at the board are the Justice Reinvestment 2 implementation, really implementing presumptive parole, and also assisting with some of the cultural changes and building our relationship with the Department of Corrections. So it is more that we're more working as a team when we need to be and issues are discussed, and we're really looking out for the best of the supervised individuals and how can we meet those needs. I'm also really looking at the decision-making process for the board. We have entered into a agreement with the National Institute of Corrections, which into a structured decision-making framework discussion. And we're looking at implementing the structured decision framework and going through the process as it's evidence-based in decision making. And then the other thing is just looking at goal setting for the board. As a board, what are our goals? What kind of data do we want to look at? Where are our needs for improvement? What information do we need? And so forth. And just making the board run as smoothly as we can. As we know, the pandemic uprooted everything. And some of those strides that we made early on when I came on to moving to electronic processes has really helped, because now all of our files are electronic. All of our meetings are now electronic, and just really trying to make the board run as smooth as and efficient as we can while meeting the needs of the community and the populations we serve.
So Mary Jane, why do you want the position?
At first I wanted it because I wanted a change, and it just sparked my interest when I sat down with the chairman the first day, when I first was like for a pseudo interview. It just really sparked, it got me thinking about how I've always wanted to work with supervised individuals, but I didn't necessarily want to work one-on-one with them. And in this mechanism, I feel like I can work with them to work on the processes behind the scenes to make things work better. And also I wanted to work with the sites more. I was purely more administrative at the Department of Corrections, and now I get to interact with a lot of Department of Corrections employees. I get to work with other employees through other departments. I get to work with the legislature more. It just seems more holistic, and I'm really enjoying it.
Committee, any questions? Senator McCormick.
Could you, and this is probably calls for a longer answer than we have time for, or that you feel like, but could you just sort of give me the thumbnail schedule? Just what is your corrections philosophy?
Ooh, I think it's just a short corrections philosophy is we really want, the main goals are, we need to keep our community safe while also really looking at community safety, victim safety, the safety of the individuals who come into the system and into corrections, and also how do we serve the needs of those all the individuals, especially those who come into supervision, what kind of programs do they need? What kind of services do they need? What kind of chance? We've really been looking at a lot of our decision making on being more individual based. What are the needs of the individuals, and what are the needs of the cases versus what are the needs as a system of a whole? Because sometimes you need to look at the granular level to find out, okay, maybe this person needs mental health needs, and that in turn makes the community safer. I hope that hit some of it.
Senator Ingalls.
How big is the parole board? Do you serve different regions of the state, or are there more than one parole board? What's the organization of the parole board?
Sure. We have one board. It has five members and 2 alternate members per statute. We then have a full, all those folks are all per diem, and they only serve on their days, that mostly days of hearings or on days of staff meetings. Then we also have 3 full-time positions. One is myself as a director, and then 2 administrative staff positions. And we serve the entire state. We have a quorum of 3 members for each scheduled hearing day. And we have 9 hearing days a month generally. And we rotate throughout the state on where those hearing days are. So one day we may be down in Springfield or the southeast portion of the state, where we're doing the Hartford Probation Parole Office, the Brattleboro Probation Parole Office, the Springfield Probation Parole Office, and the Springfield Jail or facility, and so forth. So we just rotate. Each day is like a region of the state that we're doing hearings for. And then in between, if somebody is lodged pending a violation of parole because they allegedly violated a condition of their parole, we may have one of our board members do a bail hearing if one is requested from their attorney.
How many people are you seeing a day? And I'm sorry, you're probably answering a lot of the questions that maybe some of the other folks would have got a chance to answer, but you're here, so
It's all good.
how many people do you see in a month or a week or?
Approximately in a hearing, it really varies, but approximately in a hearing day, we see anywhere from 4 to 12 to 15 individuals. It really varies on what cases are referred to us for hearings that month.
Are you handling your parole hearings remotely?
Yes, we've actually taken on the remote model. We find it to be much more efficient. It also allows us greater flexibility in our scheduling because we're not actually physically on a site. So if we want to postpone a hearing for, say, a week or two, we can do that instead of postponing it for a month when we're physically on site. It's allowing, and it's also allowing us potentially to hear violations sooner than we would have in the past as well.
How is your caseload through COVID?
I wish I had my stats in front of me, but I think we took a dip initially, but then, as we all know, the criminal justice system has taken a hit. It has decreased during COVID because we've all been moving slower, but I think we're statistically probably, even if anything, we have more parolees now than we may have before because justice reinvestment has actually shifted the view of furlough and parole. So we're looking at potentially releasing more folks onto parole versus on furlough as part of that initiative.
Well, I've been a criminal defense attorney for 38 years. I have to say that my filing cabinet is clogged more now than it was back in early 2020. And I will also have to say that the shift in mindset, if you will, from doing probation over to doing parole and furlough is, in my eyes, a very wise thing. So I appreciate what you guys are doing. It's not an easy task. I'm sure you have filing cabinets that are as loaded as mine are at the present time. Committee, other questions? Okay, Mary Jane, thank you very much for coming. One of the things I meant to mention early on, we received notification that this committee was supposed to be reviewing you folks for nomination about 3 weeks ago now, but I understand you've actually been pending for quite some time. Was it pre-COVID that we were supposed to be dealing with it?
I believe it was our reappointments were as of February 28th, 2021. So about a year, I believe.
Okay, well, we'll try to pick up the speed a little bit and get you guys through.
Okay.
I'm going to move on. Tom Griffin, welcome to Senate Institutions. Again, a little bit about yourself for the YouTube audience. You're on mute, Tom.
First of all, my name is Tom Giffen, not Griffin, so I'll start for the record. But I filled out a term last year and I was reappointed this year. Out of college, I started out with working with at-risk and adjudicated students, and I was a teacher in the public school and worked in positions with DCF and mental health, a couple of mental health agencies. I started in corrections in '84 and started with education, and I held a variety of different positions, including casework supervisor, assistant superintendent, and on several occasions for several years, I was the interim superintendent at Marble Valley Correctional Center. I spent 29 years as a member of the Rutland County Court Diversion Restorative Justice Program and served as the board president for 20 years. I hold 2 master's degrees in education, and more importantly, I am also president of the Vermont Old Cemetery Association, do a lot of work around the state doing cemetery work.
And why do you want to remain in this position?
Well, I believe my many years of experience with the Agency of Human Services and restorative justice programs, that I could continue to make a contribution. I've always been very active in different committees around the state, and I thought being a member of the good board was a good fit, and I was very honored to be nominated to the board, and I liked the way things are going as far as the alternative sentencing and how things are working. I think that I was making I could make a positive impact.
Committee, any questions? Senator Ingalls?
Do you know Jack Perry?
Oh, John Perry?
Yes, John Perry. We call him
Yes, I
Jack.
do. Yes, I remember him doing all the finance. He had a mind for financial things that no one did.
Yeah.
Senator McCormick?
Same question. What is your judicial philosophy? Your corrections philosophy. I've been doing judges. What is your corrections philosophy?
Well, I believe that of course, the common answer is that we believe everybody can change. My philosophy always has been that you expect the same outcome when you do the same thing over and over and over again. You know, it's not a wise way of looking at things. My philosophy has been is that we need to protect the public. We need really to protect the victims, and we need to make a change with the person that's going out on parole, and with the programs and the things that we have been pushing. I think that makes a difference, and I do believe that having the new way of thinking with parole is a very positive thing for the state of Vermont and for the parolee.
Senator Mazza?
What would be the rate of folks violating once you release them on parole, for example? Is the rate get better over the years, or does it stay somewhat the same because you're going to have a certain amount come back? You keep track of that?
Well, I know Mary Jane's office takes care of that, but I mean,
Okay.
recidivism is something that, you know, you can measure it different ways. You measure it, do they reoffend? You measure if they never come back to jail. Do you measure if they've been out for 5 years, 2 years? So there's all kinds of different ways of doing statistics. But I'm not from, and I do know that the rate has been pretty good in parole.
Good. Thank you for your service. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us here today.
Any other questions, Commissioner? Tom, thank you very much for coming.
Well, again, thank you for having, and it was a pleasure to be talking to your committee.
I'm not sure if Mary Jane is still on, but I'm curious, did all of you folks at one time submit any kind of a written application for the position?
I submitted a letter of reference that our chair, the chair of our board forwarded to the governor's office. I don't know if other folks did. Our chairman handles most of that.
Well, Tom, you were the next one in. Have you ever sent any kind of an application form?
I did submit an application with references. I believe it was a form that the governor's appointees have to submit, but I believe that's what I sent to the governor's office.
Okay, so Patricia and Mary, I'm going to ask you the same questions in a moment as you testify, but we've got to track down those documents because it's been a year plus since you originally did the filing. And I want to make sure if we end up having to do a report on all of you on the floor that we have something in hand to talk about when we do that. So if my committee assistant gets back to you and asks you for some written words, that will be the reason somebody has lost paperwork along the way, but one way or the other we'll catch up. Senator McCormick.
You know, we're going to want some kind of resume or synopsis, something to tell our colleagues on the floor. Will there be an oral presentation on that?
I am not clear on that. I'm thinking not.
Commissioners and board. I don't know to say so.
Well, in any event, if you hear back from us asking some questions about something in writing, you'll know why. How's that? Patricia, is it Boucher? Butcher? How do you pronounce it?
Boucher is fine. Or Bushy.
Well, that's the other one. There's one that's anglicized, one that's French, and I'm not sure which do you prefer.
Bushy, but I married into it, so.
Ah, I see.
Boucher, some pronounce it Bushy.
Okay. Well, welcome to Senate Institutions. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, senators. I live in Eastwood Falls. So I'm in Franklin County. I have been on the board since I don't remember if it was 99 or 2000. So I've been on the board for a long time. I love what I do on the board. Very rewarding. I've seen changes that are all been good. We have a great board right now. Everyone gets along. We discuss things. We have monthly meetings. So it's been very rewarding for me.
How long have you lived in Enosburg Falls?
Since 1974.
And every Memorial Day weekend, your town gets inundated by several hundred motorcycles. How do you like that?
We sure do. And it's just such a pleasure to go out and watch them when they come through town. It's incredible. It's a great feeling.
He's one of them.
Well, I'm one of them, so I want to thank you for that comment. And you just scored points with me.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, were you coached?
Yeah.
Well, we look forward to that every year. It's a wonderful event, and it's especially fun to have all of you townsfolk come out and wave at us as we're going through. It's a lot of fun.
I'm out there every year waving, whether it's raining or not.
Okay, any other questions? Mary, you are up next. Welcome to Senate Institutions.
Thank you. And I'm normally called Lucy.
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 Okay.
It's a family nickname. Born in Vermont, raised and attended schools in Montpelier, went away to college, came back to Vermont, and after several stops in Indiana, Florida, and New York, did some teaching, and then I went to work for the state of Vermont, initially at the now defunct Weeks School. So I think I'm aging myself here. From that time forward, I've been a state employee, mostly with the Department of Corrections. I have a master's degree in social work. I have done casework with juveniles, direct services with offenders, and supervised probation and parole officers for a long time, and did a brief stint as an interim probation and parole manager. So long career with the state of Vermont. I've been a member of the parole board since July of 2012. In my personal life, I have a family and grandchildren that I treasure, and I love Morgan horses. I keep one, and I'm active on the board of directors of the Vermont Morgan Horse Association, putting in a plug for the state animal. So that tells you a little bit about me. Why do I want to stay on the board? I've long had respect from the time I was working for corrections for the Vermont Parole Board. I believe that the board serves a tremendous part of the mission of the criminal justice system in Vermont. And I also believe that there's a very good reason that the Department of Corrections is housed in the Agency of Human Services. And that we, the parole board, are very much a part of that process of individual offender change, public safety through individual offender change. And I've seen programs succeed over the years and not succeed, but I truly believe that people can change and that it's our job to help facilitate that change. Everybody wins. Now, did I submit an application? I submitted an initial application. I submitted an initial resume. This was, I believe, my third appointment, and on my second reappointment. For both reappointments, I submitted letters of interest. Whether or not they're still there in your records, I don't know.
We'll try and track them down. Senator Mazza.
You have a lot of traveling then. It involves a lot of traveling in the wintertime. I mean, now that you're on Zoom, it's a lot easier, I'm sure, but over the years, it must be tough because you travel all over the state, all kinds of weather, right? You spend the whole day there.
Yeah, there were a lot of mornings that were inhospitable. And when the policy that we could, I live on a mountain, literally. And there were times when I couldn't make it. So when the policy that we could appear by telephone was implemented, that was a great relief in the winter. Being online is so much better.
Yeah, I found that true. A lot of different positions because it's tough traveling all over the state. You have to be, then you spend a full day, then you got to travel home at night. And that's going to be a long, because I know you travel all the correctional facilities. That's what I've heard in the past, but that makes it nice now with the new technology, you're able to do it.
Especially long way from area.
Yes, yeah. From up to.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, being a somewhat thrifty Vermonter, I'm very appreciative, especially with the rising fuel prices, of the gas that's being saved by not traveling all over the state.
Yeah, you're right.
The only bad part is you don't get to come to the State House and meet with us great folks.
There you go. That's the good part.
Mary, I'd like to walk back with all of you and just give us a brief rendition of what is a parole board hearing like? What happens when you literally walk in the door, or on this case, you join with Zoom? What's going through your mind?
Well,
I don't know who you want to start with.
Well, I'll start with anybody who wants to take that leap.
Okay, I'll start. Well, first of all, we've read all of the information on the offender before we even get to the hearing. We do a lot of homework ahead of time. We have a report that's written by the parole officer or the caseworker. So we have a general idea of the offender's background, what Department of Corrections is looking for. So I go into a hearing knowing what I'm going to ask for questions and what information I want to learn from the offender. Because when we release offenders on parole, at least I do, and I'm sure that's the philosophy of the rest of the board, we want to set them up for success and not for failure. So if we're not taking any of their background or anything else into consideration, we're not doing them any good. I want them to succeed if I'm going to parole them.
Is this an adversarial proceeding? In other words, is there somebody on one side saying, yes, you should, and somebody on the other side saying, no, you shouldn't? Or is this strictly you folks interviewing the parolee or prospective parolee and letting them make a sales pitch and then you decide?
Well, a lot of times the parole officer or caseworker will start out telling us how they feel. We don't have to go along with how they feel. We interview the offender and make a decision based on that. A lot of times we have victims who come and, they give us their pitch for not wanting the offender released. And we do take that into consideration. I think Howard Dean appointed me to the board the first time when I was brought on initially. And it had to do with the fact that I had a lot of victim issues. I was a victim, or my son was a victim. So I was brought on to help the victims. And I think I take their, what they have to say into consideration greatly. It doesn't always go their way, but we're all for public safety. So if we think somebody can be managed in the field under parole supervision, then that's what we do.
Anybody else want to weigh in there? Mary Jane, I'm kind of interested in hearing your thoughts on that. What's going through your mind when you're entering into a hearing? What are you looking for?
So my role is a little bit different. I am not a board member. I'm the director, so I don't make any decisions. I'm the one working with the 2 office staff to get staff members to get all the hearing stuff ready to go. We're setting up the teams meetings for the hearings. We're setting up the paperwork. We facilitate the hearings. We're the ones behind the scenes, getting folks ready to go if we're switching sites and so forth, or if we're running ahead of schedule or behind schedule. So I'm not in the decision making. Sometimes afterwards I'll debrief with folks, but it's the board members who are making the decisions and so forth. I might policy check folks once in a while, but that's about it.
So you don't get into the position where you pull the others aside and say, what were you guys thinking?
I might do that afterwards if something sparks my attention, but no, not during a hearing, because that's not my role at all. My role is to make sure things are going smoothly and look at our policies. So if the items come up or topics come up while we're having hearings, then I'll make notes so we can talk about them at our staff meetings to see if we need to make policy changes or even propose statute changes and things like that.
Okay.
Is it the majority of the board that releases or doesn't? Is it majority, or everyone has to vote yes or no?
It's a majority vote, so that's why we have a 3-member quorum on our hearings. So they do take a yes or no vote.
Okay.
Senator McCormick.
Thanks. Are there guidelines or protocols, or is this on your own judgment alone? Your decision making. Are there guidelines, prescribed questions that you're supposed to ask? Are there legal criteria for parole?
There are some legal criteria in statute about parole. I do not remember those off the top of my head. I'd have to look at the statute. However, basically, we're looking at evidence-based practice. This is another reason we're trying to formalize the decision-making process with the structured decision-making format, really looking at risk and need. And really taking into the best interest of safety, whether it be community safety, victim safety, the greater good of the supervised individual.
The word safety has shown up repeatedly in this conversation, and I respect that. There are other issues as well, essentially really basic kinds of things like the word mercy shows up. Also, the sense of justice, including a notion that, I mean, for all of our talk about rehabilitation, most people have a feeling that if you did something real bad ought to happen to you. There's still that as well. So how do you balance this idea that, I mean, I could see times looking at a person up for parole and saying, okay, he's had enough, let him go. I can also see after what he did, how do we, how do you go about balancing those conflicting, I don't think totally conflicting, but the different imperatives?
Mary's got her hand up.
I do. And I ask my fellow members to jump in if they need to. We have obligations to pay attention to Vermont statutes and sentencing. We aren't responsible for that, but we have to deal with it. And once somebody reaches the minimum of their sentence, they are eligible under statute for consideration for parole. It is not our role to further punish them. It is not our role to further shame them. Once they reach the minimum of their sentence, we have to look at all of the factors that we can consider, public safety, of course, being one of them, and in risk-sensitive notification system situations and victim issue situations, public perception, public concerns. Of course, we have to think about that. But it would be wrong, absolutely wrong, to deny someone parole because we thought they hadn't been punished enough. The sentence is the punishment.
Thank you.
Tom, you want to weigh in there?
You're on mute, Tom.
No, I don't. Oops. Yeah, I can't. I think both Pat and Lucy were very articulate in what they said, and we certainly concur with all that. The parole board's job is not to punish anybody. The parole board job is just to weigh what we see and what would be the best way of working with the parolee and society, and make sure everybody's, with the victims, has their input, and keeping the public safe. It's an interesting way to weigh things around, but we sure are not there to punish or to shame anybody.
Any other questions, committee? Folks, thank you very much for coming to join us, and wish you all the best of success. You're performing a job that I don't think a lot of people would be interested in. And I'm very happy to hear that you've got that kind of commitment. So thank you very much for coming by. Pat, I'm going to leave it with you. This Memorial Day weekend, look for the guy with a black t-shirt on a Harley. That'll be me. Although this year I might be wearing a white one that says Joe Benning for Lieutenant Governor. You'll come on up and say hi.
I'll look for that one.
Okay. Thank you guys very much for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day.
You too.
Alex, I believe that concludes our business for the afternoon.
I believe it does.
Committee, I do have a question. I was sent a proposal from Pat McDonald. Some of you may know Pat. Yeah, she had this idea that Vermont ought to have a Vermont award of, in other words, taking every year somebody to honor on behalf of Vermont, kind of like a citizen's medal or something of that nature. And I didn't know what you guys thought about that. Well, that's part of the question. Who would set up the parameters for it?
Big challenge right there.
It would. Thered be a battle for people who might be eligible for such an award.
What's her proposal? Does she have one?
She wanted to know if we would consider making such an award, and she had, I think it was Al Perry was somebody she was suggesting.
I wouldn't want to get involved. This is a touchy one. It takes a lot of research. It takes a committee or somebody to do that, because let me tell you, you can get into real pissy contest. So this one, wow.
My first year as a senator, I stupidly agreed to be a judge. Only after they gave out their it was 4th of July parade, who had the best float. I just made a town full of enemies and one friend.
That's a very because there's thousands of people that.
Right.
I wouldn't want to be involved in that legislatively. She wants to do it on their own, form some committee of communities or something, but boy, let the legislature get involved in that mess. But,
Yeah, only it's a place, it's a
that's a
nonprofit
That's a
or.
busy contest, yeah, how do you go about that? The person who's done the most, are they male, they female, anybody? Oh my God.
Chambers of Commerce
Oh,
sometimes.
yeah, that's a good job for them, statewide chamber. Yeah,
I guess I got an answer to that question.
well, that's
I
just my
told her I'd
opinion
kick it
only.
around.
Go ahead, that's up to you guys. You go on, but
I bet she wants to be the first recipient.
I think so.
We are so live.
Oh, I was only kidding, Pat.
Okay, well, that's a pretty clear signal. I did my job, which was to keep it around.
I gotta make a phone call.
All right, guys, we will see you tomorrow. I think tomorrow we have, we're gonna start diving into the Capitol bill, but we're gonna take it section by section. We're also gonna have an update with Commissioner DCF, see if we can get a handle on what they're doing for juvenile facility replacement. That's all there is.
Okay.
I'll make that a lie.